The hero of his time. Every era has its characteristics and characters, its heroes and leaders, its idols and dictators. Some of them truly propel history forward, while others grind it to a screeching halt, slowing and reversing the development of their country. A hero and a tyrant. They're featured in many works of art, on paintings, in literature, on the stage and in movies. The 21st century. Who are your heroes? I am not going to ask anything from you. The court of the occupants cannot be just by definition. Nothing personal, Your Honor. I meant to talk about something different. There was such an individual named Pontius Pilate who sat under the moonlight and contemplated. When he was forgiven, he walked along a moonlit path with Yeshua HaNazri, saying to him, "You were right. The worst sin on earth is cowardice." That was written by the great Russian writer Bulgakov. And I agree with him. Cowardice is the worst and most terrible sin on earth. Oleh Sentsov's last words addressed to the court.
20 лет дарованных в кавычках Олегу Сенцову.
While the 20 years that the so-called Russian court bestowed upon Oleh Sentsov are by no means surprising. Sentsov himself said that the FSB told him right from the start that if he screwed up anything, he would get 20 years in prison. Well, a promise made is a promise kept. There are no questions to that system. All the more, I think that if there were no protests, if people hadn't squirmed that much, that is, the public including the foreigners, he might have been given a more lenient sentence. But as it turned out, he has gotten too much attention, and that from half of the world.
Слишком уж он в фокусе оказался, причем в фокусе половины земшара.
Freedom to political prisoners. Freedom to political prisoners. We must not shoot our brothers. All they had to do was show that nobody could tell them what to do, especially the decaying rotten West and fleecy liberals. They promised 20 years, and they kept their word.
А мы сделаем так, как, значит, обещали 20, и вот мы и дадим 20.
Serhiy Trymbach, Ukrainian film critic, screenwriter, author of books on the development of national film culture and hundreds of articles and reviews in leading Ukrainian and Russian publications, participated in film festivals in Berlin, Moscow, Locarno, West Baden, Oxford, New York, Anapa and Kiev, president of the Ukrainian Film Critics Association, chairman of the board of the Ukrainian Association of Cinematographers. On August 25, the North Caucasus District Military Court sentenced the Crimeans Oleh Sentsov and Alexander Kolchenko, whom the Russian authorities accused of preparing a terrorist attack on the annexed peninsula. According to the court verdict, Ukrainian film director Oleh Sentsov was sentenced to 20 years in a maximum security penitentiary, and Alexander Kolchenko was sentenced to 10 yeyears of imprisonment.
Меня другое как бы поражает, а именно сам Олег Сенцов.
I'm amazed by something else, namely Oleh Sentsov himself, because we saw a recording of the hearings, his speech, his demeanor, and how he and Kolchenko sang the national anthem of Ukraine. There we saw true heroes.
Это действительно мы увидели героя.
This word has become a bit stale. We can hear "Glory to the heroes" on every corner. This is exactly what we had learned back in the Soviet school, and this is how a courageous man should behave. He personally said in court that cowardice is a person's greatest flaw, and that in general a person commits a crime if they're afraid of something.
Самое, может, большой недостаток преступления, в общем, человека, если он боится.
Третья часть населения
A third of the population of Russia is made up of those who are well aware of what is happening, those who don't believe in any propaganda, and those who see what terrible crimes your leadership is committing. But those people are for some reason afraid to admit these facts.
Но как человеку не бояться, вот если нет вокруг вот таких.
But how can you not be afraid when there is nobody to set an example? How can you not be afraid when you've been in prison for over a year and not even in your homeland? Nevertheless, he kept. We saw how he was making fun of the judge, how he sang the anthem, and how he spoke of Putin, and despite the sentence of 20 years in prison. Nevertheless, yesterday, I caught myself thinking about that man with pride, as if he was a symbol and an example. Not for me, because I'm an old man. He's truly a living example for my grandson. As they say, it probably sounds corny, but that's the way it is. Here is a man, a great man, beautiful in his anger, in his civil hatred, in his civil contempt of the power elite of Russia, and how it is behaving these days.
Это вот действительно живой пример, что называется, для... Это банально, конечно, звучит, быть может, но это так. Вот человек, прекрасный человек, прекрасен в своем гневе, в гражданском своем презрении к власти, которая ведет себя вот таким образом.
And yes, there is also the danger this will be revived in our country. We have not yet forgotten how fast Yanukovych's regime was overturned. That threat is still there. And the threat of Putin's regime ruling here again is very real if we, Ukrainians, continue to be afraid of such a threat. But the example of Oleh Sentsov shows that there is no need to be afraid and that everything will be fine. We will then build a truly remarkable state because we have a wonderful country. Be that as it may, we continue to face major problems with the state system and the ruling power. I must reiterate that Oleh Sentsov is truly a hero of our time for the young children growing up in Ukraine and the young generation in our country on the whole.
Повторяю, для подрастающих, для молодого поколения, это действительно герой нашего времени, Олег Сенцов.
Any decent, honest person cannot remain indifferent to lawlessness and frivolity. The entire progressive world community closely followed the court trial in Rostov-on-Don. Many famous filmmakers, Pedro Almodovar, Jacques Audiard, Andrzej Wajda, Krzysztof Zanussi, Daniel Olbrychsky, the chairman of the European Film Academy, Mike Downey, and even the pro-Putin director Nikita Mikhalkov appealed to the president of Russia to free Oleh Sentsov from prison. The most prominent figures of world culture and ordinary activists like Sentsov's colleagues in Ukraine and even in Russia are doing everything possible to show their support for him. Despite their efforts, they were all stunned by the outrageous verdict passed soon against the reputable Ukrainian film director. While I'm grateful to the Russian filmmakers who supported and continue to support Oleh Sentsov, I would, of course, like to hear the opinion of Nikita Mikhalkov, who during the closing of last year's Moscow festival answered my question regarding the release of Sentsov, saying that he supported that appeal to Putin. When I approached him after the festival closing ceremony to thank him for the support, I also asked him what he thought would happen to Sentsov next. He just said everything will be fine.
Все будет хорошо, считаю. Ну, то есть, как вы знаете, Mikhalkov.
That is, you know, Mikhalkov communicates directly with the officials, or is, at any rate, close to them, which means that he knew something back then. That is how I understand that. Nevertheless, I don't know what he would have said in this regard since then. I was told that the FSB had allegedly showed him irrefutable evidence of Sentsov's guilt, but for some reason the public believed maybe Mikhalkov had some insider information regarding this evidence, but neither we nor anyone in Russia knows exactly what that evidence was. But we do know for certain that one eyewitness refused to testify, and the other one was not very willing to disclose what they knew. Simply for this reason, I believe that Russian film directors, who are mainly considered to be people of the cultural sphere, are a reliable litmus test of how they behave and why.
Это вот лакмусовая бумажка, вот как они ведут себя, Хотя я понимаю, что многие себя убедили так или иначе, что режим Путина это...
Even though I understand that many people have convinced themselves that, one way or another, Putin's regime is their regime, the regime that protects Russia, its people, culture, and so on, I think that this is a total misconception. They just need time to comprehend the negative and often horrifying facets of the regime. Another factor is that we must constantly keep a scrupulous eye on the actions of this regime, so that we, ourselves, because history has shown that the descent into darkness is very quick. You might be in the light at one moment, but then suddenly the lights are turned off, and that's it. You're left in the dark. That political darkness can last indefinitely. It is precisely that sudden flick of the switch that we must be afraid of. In the morning of September 7, Iranian director Mohsen Makhmalbaf received a Robert Bresson Award at the Venice Festival for his work, which showed a difficult path in the search for the spiritual meaning of life. He dedicated his award to his Ukrainian colleague, political prisoner Oleh Sentsov. Sentsov should make new movies instead of counting years sitting in prison.
Ну, конечно, не 20 лет. Во-первых, 20 лет путинский режим не продержится. Вот не те, кто придет ему в таком же формате и с такой же мировоззрением, не думаю, что это будет. Но даже при Путине, я думаю, что Путин рано или поздно, значит, захочет сыграть. Я думаю, игра на этом и построена, что вот суд, видите, суд, да, ну, у нас...
Well, of course, he will not spend the whole 20 years in prison. First of all, Putin's regime will not last 20 years. And I don't think that those who will replace him will have the same worldview and format. But even with Putin at the helm, I think Putin will sooner or later want to play the game. I think that is what the game is all about. You see, our court does not obey the officials. It does what it wants to. That's the name of the game. And we seem to believe it, or at least more Russians believe this. But then again, I think that the pressure and the contempt of the world community will, in one way or another, force Putin to devise some new clever scheme. After all, he wants to preserve his reputation, and that means that he will eventually come up with some new scheme to deal with this sensitive issue. Maybe it will be an exchange or something else. I'm confident that within 2 or 3 years at most, Oleh Sentsov will be released from prison, and I'm sure that Serhiy Trymbach said to Andrei Tarkovsky, "You have one drawback. You have never served time in prison. An artist must spend some time in prison." Clearly, this should not be taken literally. However, a person like Dostoevsky, for example, who was in penal servitude and survived such trials, gained some kind of new individual strength, and this is exactly what we see in Oleh Sentsov, even on a TV screen. I think that very soon a great artist will appear, and that Oleh himself will discover the depths and dimensions that he does not even realize, and possibly does not even suspect that he has in himself. The trials and tribulations of such a large scale and such properties truly shape artists much more than they can even imagine in their nature. They just mold it and create a much greater personality, and I firmly believe that this will definitely happen.
Испытания такого масштаба, такого свойства, они действительно образуют художника значительно больше, чем может он по природе своей где-то замыслен. Просто они это вылепливают, выстраивают другого человека, гораздо более крупного. Вот я думаю, это произойдет обязательно.
The European Film Academy sent an appeal to Russian President Vladimir Putin and the leadership of the Russian law enforcement agencies with a demand to immediately release the film director. The convict was also supported by the famous Russian director Andrei Zvyagintsev, who was nominated for an Oscar for his film Leviathan. He was joined by other Russian filmmakers such as Alexei German Jr., Alexander Sakurov, Alexander Kot, Alexei Fedorchenko, Andrei Plahov, Ivan Verypayev, Askold Kurov, and Marina Razbeshkina. August 25, 2015, Oleh Sentsov is a talented film director, a promising and original artist, sentenced to 20 years in prison for unproven crimes he did not commit. Heroes in Time in the 21st century.